Ooh, spicy. So today is the 11th. Yes, the 11th of May. Um, we're really getting through this year already. It's crazy to think that that 5 months and 11 days have passed already. I was trying to think now what we even did for New Year's. I probably got baked and forgot about it. In all honesty, it's a high likelihood. Anyhow, today's day 84. 6 days left to go, less than a week. Um, Yesterday I talked a little bit about wanting to change up my reading habits. I put down Booker T's book. I got to the speeches part, and it's all good stuff still, but a lot of the speeches that he gives were taken at the beginning of school terms or school semesters, I guess you could say, at his institute, and as a result, a lot of them repeated the same information. And I found that it was information that I am increasingly not needing to get. The whole purpose of me wanting to read that book was to get a better idea of what his experience was as someone who was a former slave, who then went on to found an institute that captured the attention of several presidents of the United States and countless high-ranking people within American politics, as well as royalty in Europe. And I think, having read the book, my sort of cliff notes for it is it's a book that everyone in the United States should read, um, to get an understanding of what is possible when you take responsibility for your actions, and when you uh, make small steps towards bettering yourself that you take an active interest in pursuing, rather than putting it off and then finding excuses for why you put it off. Consequently, I've shifted focus to a new book by an English philosopher by the name of Roger Scruton. The book is called How to Be Conservative. It's for me. It's come. I've started reading it at the right time in my life, after having taken some history. Well, my degree so far is just an associate's. My intention is to finish up my bachelor's within the next 2 or 3 years. But having taken some study and having been in the workforce for 20 years now, 21 years, I feel like I have enough experience and things saved for me to be able to make some comments, and for me to carry an opinion about things. And I've noticed over time that my political philosophy. I definitely identify with Republican. Not with current Republicans and the things that they currently stand for, but the concept of Republican, where you support the separation of the three bodies of power within the country. You support the separation of the executive branch, the judicial branch, and the legislative branch, and that each of those needs to work in tandem and in concert with one another in order for the country to function correctly. And when one gets more powerful than the others, it causes problems. What I've learned over the course of that time is that that system, as long as it's adhering to a specific set of rules, so a constitution essentially, is actually a pretty good system, and a constitutional republic is a good system. But all too often, Republicans are also derided as conservatives, and I've found that there are things, as I get older particularly, there are things that I find that I feel conservative about. I'm quite socially, I'm quite liberal, and within the world itself, I have no problem with accepting all of the different variants of the ways that people want to express themselves. But there are some things that I think, when we tear them up by the roots, is bad. And so this reading this book and continuing my study is an effort for me to explore that about myself and figure out like what it is that I want to conserve. I find that when I hear people talking about breaking down the nuclear family or tearing down the system of law and justice that we have in the United States, or completely rebuilding the government or society, or whatever it is that some people that are radically out there are saying we should do, I find myself becoming defensive about those things, because I know, having studied a little of history, that when things are unstable, society is not a good place to be, and people become more antagonistic towards one another, and there's less cooperation in societies that are less stable. And we need to cooperate if we're going to accomplish these dreams that people have about, multiple colony human beings having places in the stars where we can fly to, and we have ideas about colonies on Mars and colonies on the moon. But we're only going to get to those places if we're working together, if we're cooperating. And when people are saying we need to tear down the systems and rebuild it from scratch, it's like, well, when we had nothing prior to the system that we have now, it was bad. Resources were scarce because we didn't have systems designed to bring resources in. Law and order was scarce. People had to manage that themselves, and so it was essentially whoever had the biggest stick won. And that's not always the best. In fact, it's almost never the best system. There was no collective work towards anything, because you were fighting against everyone else for resources and for security. And when when Western civilization created these societies, and we started to sort of, Greece didn't work because of this, Rome didn't work because of this, the colonial system didn't work because of this, and now we're at this system, and we're starting to see what doesn't work about this system. But that doesn't mean that we should abandon it or tear it all down and try to rebuild it from the ground up. To do so would be insanity, and the cost in human life and in time, I think, would be irreparably damaging. But the things that I push back on are still vague to me. They still seem vague to me. I think the notion of the nuclear family is something that, when people talk about wanting to destroy that and wanting to get rid of the nuclear family, I think it's crazy, because the nuclear family has been a tried and tested system. And obviously there's room for abuse in any system, but in general, the nuclear family provides ways for children to get the best of both worlds. And then, of course, that ties into both parents are working, and your kids are being raised by people that are sponsored by the government. Like, is that what we should really be doing? I think those are all things that tie in with it, but it's hard to know until I explore it more. So that's what the purpose of reading this book and getting back into study again eventually is going to be about, is figuring out how I think about things and determining the ways that I want to look at the world. Maybe being more aware of what those ways are. As far as the marijuana quit and the video game quit goes, it's 6 days to go till the 90-day window. It's interesting looking back from the start of it. It started from a place of real anger. Like, I was really, really mad about something, and I had that little mini meltdown that started all of this. This introspection and reflection. And I guess it shows that anger can be used for good, particularly anger at yourself when you're failing at something. But it's also brought about changes for people around me. I hadn't really considered that until my friend and I talked about it, and he had mentioned that the changes that I've been implementing have affected him as well. And my partner has talked to me about it and said that she feels the same way. She feels like she's becoming more cognizant of the things that she can be better about being personally responsible for. And I've seen it in the way that she acts. She's not as like when she's getting pouty, I can tell that it's a surface level thing, and she's sort of indulging it out of habit more than out of a genuine place of poutiness. And then she typically seems like these days she tends to give up the poutiness and get on with things, which wasn't the case in the past. In the past, she would wallow for a little bit about what it was that she was pouting about. So the next 6 days, I guess I want to take the time to reflect on what has changed, and what I have to look forward to going forward, and what I'd like to do going forward, so that I can kind of elucidate or verbalize the crazy amount of ideas that I've had over the last 90 days into some succinct sort of positions and intentions, and then maybe make a record of those, so that after the 90 days I have a milestone made at 90 days, and this is what's going to happen for the next 90 days or 90 weeks or whatever. Anyway, that's it for me. Enjoy your Tuesdays, ye internet nerds. Ka kite.